Is this supposed to be your call sign? Juicebox? Really? The question hung in the air, dripping with amusement and disdain. Captain Miller stood tall, his chest puffing out beneath the immaculate tailoring of his Marine Corps service dress blues. The midnight blue coat was lint-free, the gold buttons gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights of the chow hall, and the red piping was sharp enough to cut glass. In his hand he held a battered, oxidized brass Zippo lighter he had swiped off the table, flipping it over to reveal the engraving on the back. Juicebox. Around the table, the captain's entourage of lieutenants and senior NCOs chuckled. They were all dressed for the upcoming ball, a sea of pristine uniforms and high-and-tight haircuts, radiating the invincible energy of men who had not yet learned that time comes for everyone. Sitting opposite them, looking like a smudge on a pristine canvas, was Wayne Douglas. Wayne did not look like a warrior. At 82 years old, he looked like a man who had been eroded by the wind. He wore a faded red shirt that had seen better decades, and over it, a drab olive field jacket that was fraying at the cuffs. He sat hunched over a plastic tray containing a half-eaten portion of meatloaf and a cup of black coffee that had gone cold 10 minutes ago. He didn't reach for the lighter. He didn't look at the captain. He just stared at his coffee, his hands resting on the table. They were large hands, spotted with age and scarred from years of labor, and the right one possessed a subtle, rhythmic tremor. "I asked you a question, old-timer," Miller pressed, his smile not reaching his eyes. He tossed the lighter up and caught it, a casual display of dexterity. "You walk into a Marine Corps chow hall, looking like you slept in a dumpster, taking up a table meant for active duty personnel, and you're sporting a lighter that says Juicebox. What, did you drive the supply truck for the mess hall? Did you hand out fruit punch in the rear?" One of the lieutenants, a young man with a jawline that could peel an orange, leaned in. "Maybe he was the hydration officer, sir. Very critical role, keeping the boys refreshed." The table erupted in laughter again. The chow hall was busy, filled with the clatter of silverware and the low roar of conversation, but the noise around table 12 had died down. Other Marines were watching. Some looked uncomfortable, shifting their trays, while others watched with the morbid curiosity of a schoolyard circle forming around a fight. Wayne finally lifted his head. His eyes were a watery blue surrounded by a roadmap of deep wrinkles. He didn't look angry. He looked tired. "I would like my lighter back, please," Wayne said. His voice was gravel rubbing against sandpaper, soft but distinct. Miller closed his fist around the brass lighter. "You'll get it back when I decide you're cleared to be here. I've seen a lot of stolen valor cases lately. Pop, guys buying old jackets at surplus stores, wandering onto base to scrounge a free meal, pretending they were something they weren't. You have no ID displayed, you're out of uniform, and frankly, you're a little aromatic for a place where officers are eating." "I have permission," Wayne said simply. "From who?" "The gate guard you slipped a 20. Miller scoffed. He leaned down, placing both hands on the table, invading Wayne's personal space. The smell of expensive cologne and starch wafted over the old man. "This base is for Marines, real Marines, men who uphold the standard. You look at me, look at my men, and then you look at yourself. Do you think you belong at this table?" Wayne slowly reached into his breast pocket. Immediately, the mood shifted, the laughter cut off. Miller's hand dropped to his waist, a reflex, though he was unarmed in dress blues. The NCOs tensed, ready to pounce. Wayne moved with the agonizing slowness of arthritis, pulling out not a weapon, but a folded, grease-stained napkin. He wiped the corner of his mouth, then folded the napkin again and placed it next to his tray. "I belong where I am planted, Captain," Wayne murmured, "and I earned this seat before you were a concept in your father's mind." Miller's face reddened. The insult was quiet, but it landed. He stood up straight, his patience evaporating. He felt the eyes of the room on him. He couldn't let a vagrant talk back to him in front of his subordinates. It undermined the discipline, the image, the very fabric of the Corps he worshipped. "Get up," Miller ordered, pointing to the door. "You're leaving, now, or I'm having the MPs drag you out and toss you off the main gate. And I'm keeping the lighter as evidence of unauthorized distinct insignia. Juicebox." What a joke. Wayne didn't move. He looked at the lighter in Miller's hand, and for a second the fluorescent lights of the chow hall seemed to flicker. The sterile smell of floor wax and meatloaf vanished, replaced by the hot copper scent of hydraulic fluid and the iron tang of blood. In that fraction of a second, Wayne wasn't in a chow hall. He was strapped into the vibrating, screaming metal carcass of a UH-34 Seahorse. The bird was bucking like a wounded animal. The windshield was gone, shattered by small arms fire. The instrument panel was a Christmas tree of red warning lights that he was ignoring because he didn't need a light to tell him they were falling out of the sky. The collective pitch lever was fighting him, vibrating so hard it threatened to shatter the bones in his left arm. Through the headset, the static was deafening, punctuated by the scream of the tail rotor struggling to hold the heading. He looked down at his flight suit. It was soaked, not with sweat, but with the pinkish-red hydraulic fluid spraying from the overhead line, coating him, blinding him, slicking the controls. He was marinating in the vital fluids of the dying machine. "JUICEBOX," the radio operator had screamed over the net, his voice cracking with terror. "You're leaking everywhere. You're pouring fluid." "I ain't dead yet," Wayne had roared back, blinking the stinging fluid out of his eyes as the tree line rushed up to meet them. "Just keep the guns talking." The memory snapped shut as quickly as it had opened. Wayne blinked, the chow hall rushing back into focus. The tremor in his right hand had stopped, replaced by a rigidity that turned his knuckles white. He looked at Captain Miller, really looked at him, seeing not the rank but the boy beneath the uniform. "I'm not leaving until I finish my coffee," Wayne said. Miller let out a sharp, incredulous breath. He turned to the largest Marine in the group, a gunnery sergeant who looked like he was carved out of granite. "Gunny, escort this civilian off the premises. Use necessary force if he resists. He's trespassing." As the gunnery sergeant stepped forward, cracking his knuckles, the air in the chow hall grew heavy. But 3 tables away, a young corporal named Elias Thorne was frozen mid-chew. Thorne wasn't part of the officer's clique. He was just a grunt grabbing a quick meal before his shift, but he was a grunt who loved history. He had been watching the old man since he sat down. He had noticed something the captain had missed in his arrogance. When Wayne had reached for his napkin, the flap of his field jacket had fallen open for a split second. Thorne had seen the lining. It wasn't the standard olive drab. It was customized, a faded silk map of the Ashau Valley sewn into the fabric, and pinned to the inner pocket was a small, tarnished metal device. It wasn't a standard ribbon. It was a set of miniature wings, but not the kind issued today. They were the heavy, unsanctioned, theater-made wings of the Ridge Runners, a defunct, legendary transport squadron that didn't officially exist on most rosters because they flew missions that command didn't want written down. Thorne looked at the lighter in the captain's hand. "JUICEBOX." The name triggered a memory from a mandatory history brief he had slept halfway through, but the name had stuck because it was so stupid. Until the instructor had explained it. Panic spiked in Thorne's chest. He dropped his fork, the metal clanging loudly against his tray. He scrambled out of his seat, ignoring the glare of his squad leader. He didn't intervene. He knew a corporal couldn't stop a captain on a power trip. He bolted for the exit, sprinting into the hallway toward the administrative offices. He needed a phone, and he needed someone with stars on their collar. Thorne burst into the hallway, his boots skidding on the waxed tile. He spotted a wall phone reserved for official use and snatched the receiver, his fingers trembling as he dialed the direct line to the base commander's adjutant. He knew he was risking a court-martial for jumping the chain of command, but he also knew that if Captain Miller threw that old man out, the fallout would be nuclear. "Command deck, Sergeant Davis speaking." "Sergeant, this is Corporal Thorne, Echo Company. I need to speak to General Vance immediately. It's a Code Red emergency in the chow hall." "Code Red." "Thorne, if this is a prank." "It's not a prank," Thorne hissed, looking back toward the chow hall doors. "There's a captain harassing an elderly veteran. He's about to physically remove him." The captain took his lighter. "It says JUICEBOX on it." There was a silence on the other end of the line. A silence so profound it felt like the line had gone dead. Then the sergeant's voice came back, but the tone had changed completely. It was sharp, breathless. "Did you say the lighter says JUICEBOX?" "Yes, Sergeant. The old man he's old. Red shirt, trimmers. Don't let them touch him," the sergeant ordered, his voice rising to a shout. "Do not let them lay a hand on him. I'm patching you to the general's personal mobile. Stay on the line." Inside the general's office, a mile away, General Vance was adjusting his tie in the mirror. He was a stern man, a 3-star general who had seen combat in the Gulf and beyond, but he revered the generation that came before him. His phone buzzed on the mahogany desk. He ignored it. It buzzed again, persistent. Then his office door flew open. His aide, a major, looked pale. "Sir, it's the chow hall. Someone has Wayne Douglas." Vance froze. "Wayne? He's here? I thought he wasn't coming until the ceremony tonight." "He came early to eat, sir. A Captain Miller is trying to arrest him for stolen valor. He confiscated his lighter, the JUICEBOX lighter." Vance's face went from calm to a mask of fury in a heartbeat. He didn't ask questions. He didn't grab his cover. He stormed out of the office, moving with a speed that terrified the staff in the outer room. "Get the car," he barked. "No, forget the car. We run, it's faster. And get the MPs on the radio. Tell them if anyone touches Mr. Douglas, I will have their stripes before they hit the floor." Back in the chow hall, the situation had deteriorated. The gunnery sergeant had a hand on Wayne's shoulder. Wayne sat immovable, his body rigid, his eyes locked on Miller. "I'm asking you one last time, Captain," Wayne said, his voice low. "Give me my property, and let me eat in peace. You don't know what you're doing." "Oh, I know exactly what I'm doing," Miller sneered. "I'm taking out the trash. Gunny, hoist him." The gunny tightened his grip. "Let's go, old-timer. Don't make me hurt you. You're hurting yourself, son," Wayne whispered. Miller laughed, a harsh barking sound. "You threaten me. You threaten a commissioned officer. That's assault. Add it to the list. I want this man in cuffs. I want him processed. And I want a psych eval done, because clearly he's delusional if he thinks he has any standing here." Miller turned to the crowd, playing to his audience. "This is what happens when standards slip. We tolerate mediocrity. We tolerate imposters. Not on my watch. This lighter," he held it up again. "This is a mockery. A call sign is earned in blood, not bought at a pawn shop. JUICEBOX. It's pathetic." The doors to the chow hall didn't just open. They exploded inward. The sound was like a thunderclap, silencing the room instantly. Every head turned. Standing in the doorway was not a squad of MPs, but a phalanx of high-ranking officers. At the center was General Vance, his chest heaving from the sprint, his face a shade of purple that promised violence. Behind him were two colonels and the sergeant major of the base. The room snapped to attention. Chairs scraped as Marines leaped to their feet. Captain Miller, caught off guard, spun around, his face shifting from arrogance to confusion, and then to a smug satisfaction. He assumed the cavalry had arrived to support him. "General," Miller called out, stepping forward and saluting sharply. "Sir, I have the situation under control. I've apprehended a civilian trespasser posing as a veteran. He was refusing to leave." General Vance didn't return the salute. He didn't even look at Miller. He walked right through him, his shoulder checking the captain hard enough to knock him off balance. Miller stumbled, his mouth opening to protest, but the words died in his throat as he watched the three-star general drop to one knee beside the dirty old man. The entire chow hall was silent. You could hear the hum of the refrigerators. "Wayne," General Vance said, his voice gentle, filled with a reverence that stunned the onlookers. "I am so sorry. We were waiting for you at the HQ. I didn't know you slipped in here." Wayne looked at the general, then at the gunnery sergeant who had snatched his hand away as if the old man were made of burning coal. "I just wanted some meatloaf, Tom," Wayne said, a small tired smile touching his lips. "It used to be better in '68. I'll fire the cook myself," Vance joked weakly, though his eyes were furious. He stood up and turned slowly to face Captain Miller. Miller was pale. He was beginning to realize that the ground beneath him had vanished. "Sir, he had no ID. He was out of uniform. He has that lighter." General Vance extended his hand. "Give it to me." Miller placed the Zippo in the general's palm with trembling fingers. Vance looked at it, his thumb brushing the engraving of JUICEBOX. He looked up at the room, his voice projecting to every corner of the mess hall. "Do you know who this man is?" Vance asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Miller stammered. "No, sir." He refused to identify. "His name is Major Wayne Douglas, USMC, retired." Vance interrupted, his voice rising. "Navy Cross, Silver Star with 2 clusters, Purple Heart. I lose count." "And you mocked his call sign." Miller swallowed hard. "Sir, JUICEBOX," it sounded. Vance stepped closer to Miller, until they were nose to nose. "You thought it was funny. You thought it was soft." Vance held up the lighter. In 1968, during the siege of Kazan, Hill 881 was cut off, surrounded by 2 NVA battalions. They were out of ammo, out of water, and out of blood plasma. The weather was 0-0. No birds were flying. Command grounded the fleet. Vance gestured to Wayne, who had gone back to sipping his cold coffee. Major Douglas stole a UH-34. He loaded it with crates of plasma and ammo. He flew solo into a monsoon, under heavy anti-aircraft fire. By the time he reached the hill, his bird had taken 40 rounds. The hydraulic lines were severed. The fuel lines were bracketed. The general's voice cracked with emotion. He was spraying hydraulic fluid and aviation fuel into the cockpit. He was soaked in it. It was burning his eyes, his skin. He was flying a bomb. When he keyed the mic to the guys on the ground, he didn't ask for a vector. He told them he was leaking juice everywhere, but he was bringing the goods. Vance turned to the room. He hovered over that hill for 20 minutes, taking fire, kicking crates out the door himself because he had no crew. The Marines on the ground said the helicopter looked like a squeezed juice box, dripping fluids from every rivet. He didn't leave until every crate was on the ground. He crashed 2 miles out, broke his back, crawled 3 miles back to friendly lines carrying the radio. Vance turned his gaze back to Miller. He saved 200 Marines that day. He is the reason my father came home to have me. He is the reason half the NCOs in this room have a lineage to look up to. He is the JUICEBOX. And you tried to throw him out. Miller looked like he wanted to vomit. The color had drained from his face so completely he looked like a wax figure. The lieutenants behind him were staring at the floor, praying for invisibility. The gunnery sergeant who had touched Wayne looked like he wanted to cut his own hand off. Vance wasn't finished. You are a disgrace to that uniform, Captain. You mistook polish for discipline and arrogance for pride. You saw an old man and saw a target. You didn't see the history. You didn't see the sacrifice. Vance turned to the sergeant major. Take this captain's name. Suspend his command authority pending a formal inquiry. And get these entourage members out of my sight before I strip the rank off their collars right here. Aye, aye, sir. The sergeant major barked, stepping forward. Miller opened his mouth to speak, perhaps to apologize, perhaps to beg, but Wayne spoke first. Tom, Wayne said. General Vance turned immediately, his demeanor softening. Yes, Wayne? Don't end him, Wayne said. He gestured to the empty chair opposite him. Just make him sit. Vance looked confused. Wayne? He needs to learn, not burn, Wayne said, his voice steady. He's young. He's dumb. He thinks the uniform makes the Marine. Let him sit. Let him drink a cup of coffee with me. Vance stared at Wayne for a long moment, then nodded slowly. He looked at Miller. You heard the major. Sit down. Miller looked terrified. This was worse than being yelled at. He had to sit across from the man he had just humiliated, the man who was a living legend. He sank into the plastic chair, his pristine dress blues suddenly feeling heavy and ridiculous. Vance placed the lighter gently back on the table in front of Wayne. Then the general stood at attention. He didn't shout. He simply rendered a slow, perfect salute. One by one, the colonels, the sergeant major, and then the entire chow hall, cooks, grunts, officers stood and saluted. Wayne didn't salute back. He just nodded, embarrassed by the fuss. He flicked the Zippo open. The flame flared up, strong and steady. He touched it to the rim of his coffee cup, just for a second, staring at the fire. For a brief moment, the flash of the lighter took him back, not to the crash, but to the moment before, to the feeling of the stick in his hand, the smell of the fluid, the absolute certainty that he was going to die, and the absolute refusal to let that stop him. He remembered the voice of the young Lance Corporal on the radio on Hill 881. God bless you, JUICEBOX. You're raining life down here. Wayne snapped the lighter shut. The sound was a sharp period at the end of the sentence. The room relaxed, but the atmosphere had changed. It was sacred ground now. General Vance squeezed Wayne's shoulder and stepped back to let them talk. Wayne looked at Miller. The captain was trembling. He couldn't meet the old man's eyes. Drink your coffee, son, Wayne said gently. I'm sorry, sir, Miller whispered, his voice breaking. I didn't know. You weren't supposed to know, Wayne said. You were supposed to look. Wayne took a sip of his cold coffee. It tasted terrible, but it tasted like life. You see this lighter? Wayne pushed it toward the center of the table. I didn't get this because I was a hero. I got it because I was leaking. I was broken, but I kept flying. That's the job. It ain't about how shiny your buttons are, Captain. It's about what you carry inside when the tank is empty. Miller nodded, tears welling in his eyes. He took off his cover and set it on the table. He unbuttoned his dress coat, loosening the perfect collar. He looked human again. Tell me, sir, Miller asked softly. Tell me about the hill. Wayne smiled, and for the first time the years seemed to melt away from his face. He leaned in. Well, it started with a broken fuel line and a lot of bad decisions. The chow hall went about its business, but the noise was lower, more respectful. At table 12, a young captain sat listening to an old man in a red shirt, learning the lesson that every Marine eventually learns. The most dangerous thing on the battlefield isn't the weapon you can see, but the spirit you can't. The institutional fallout came swiftly the next morning. A base-wide memo was issued by General Vance mandating a new training module on unit history and veteran interactions. The JUICEBOX protocol, as the troops quietly dubbed it, required every officer to spend time at the local VA center, listening, not talking. Captain Miller was not fired, thanks to Wayne's intervention, but he was reassigned to a logistics training unit where he would spend the next 2 years teaching young supply officers the importance of getting the juice to the front lines, no matter the cost. He was never seen mocking a veteran again. In fact, years later, Miller would be known as the fiercest advocate for the old breed on the entire base. But the real end of the story happened 2 weeks later. Wayne was sitting on his porch, watching the sun go down. A car pulled up. It was Miller, in civilian clothes. He walked up the driveway carrying a small, wrapped box. He didn't say much. He just handed the box to Wayne. Inside was a custom display case. It didn't hold a medal. It held a small, sealed vial of red hydraulic fluid and a piece of shrapnel Miller had dug out of the archives from a recovered H-34 wreckage. The plaque read, "To JUICEBOX, who poured it all out so we could come home." Wayne looked at the young man and nodded. They sat on the porch in silence, watching the day fade, two Marines sharing the quiet that only those who understand the cost of service can truly appreciate. If this story of Wayne "JUICEBOX" Douglas reminded you that heroes often walk among us in the most unassuming ways, please like and share this video. Subscribe to Veteran Valor for more stories of courage, sacrifice, and the legends who built the freedoms we enjoy today. Semper Fi.